The moon hangs like a smooth, silver coin in the deep velvet sky. Below it, the Mediterranean sea breathes, a long, slow sigh against the sandy shore. The air is warm and soft, carrying the distant, briny scent of the tide, mixed with the dry, sweet perfume of thyme from the hills. Somewhere, a night bird calls, a single, clear note that drifts on the breeze and fades into the gentle lapping of water on stone. You are lying on a smooth, sun-warmed rock, watching the stars blink into existence one by one, each a tiny, cold fire. The world is hushed, holding its breath. The only thing to do is listen to the rhythm of the sea, feel the steady pull of the planet beneath you, and let your thoughts settle like silt in still water. And in the deep calm of this night, a story begins, not with a shout, but with a whisper from the depths of time. A story of an island, they say, that was once a jewel in this very sea. A place of wonder and peace, known to the ancient philosophers as Atlantis. Section 1. The Echo in Plato's Garden. Let us begin not with stones or ships, but with words. With a man, long ago, sitting in a grove of ancient olive trees. The sun filters through the leaves, dappling the parchment before him. This is Plato, the student of Socrates, the teacher of Aristotle. His mind is a still pool, reflecting the great questions of existence. And in a dialogue, a conversation between his mentor Socrates and a wise, aged statesman named Critias, a story is told. It is a story Critias heard from his grandfather, who heard it from the great lawgiver Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests in the city of Say, long ago. The air in Plato's garden is thick with the smell of dust and ink and ripe figs. A bee drones lazily past. The story speaks of a great and mighty island nation, a power that arose from the sea, a continent-sized realm that ruled the Western Ocean. It describes a people favored by Poseidon, the earthshaker, the god of the sea. They were a race of strength and wisdom, their civilization built upon concentric rings of land and water, a marvel of engineering and artistry. The priests told Solon this was not a myth, but a true history, lost to the Greeks but remembered in the annals of Egypt. They said Atlantis was real. And so the seed is planted. In the quiet of a philosopher's notebook, in the drowsy warmth of an Athenian afternoon, the name, Atlantis, enters the world. It is not a discovery of ruins, but an echo, a beautiful, puzzling echo from a past so deep it feels almost like a dream. The listeners in Plato's time would have nodded, perhaps, accepting it as a noble parable about hubris and the wrath of the gods. A warning. But for us, listening now in the dark, it is something else. It is the first tremor of a mystery that will not let the world go. It is the gentle, persistent pull of a question mark drawn on the surface of the sea. Section 2. The geometry of a dream. Imagine the city. Let your mind become the soft clay of the imagination. The priests of Say described it to Solon as a place of perfect order, laid out by Poseidon himself. At the very center, a hill, sacred and small. Upon this hill, a temple to the god and his bride, a mortal woman. Around this central hill, 2 rings of land. Then 2 rings of water. Then 2 more rings of land. 6 circles in all, alternating like the ripples from a stone dropped perfectly still. The land was lush and fertile, yielding 2 harvests each year, watered by the gentle rains and the clever aqueducts the Atlanteans built. The canals were straight and deep, bustling with ships bearing all the wonders of the world. Tin from the north, ivory from the south, strange spices that perfumed the air, and metals of a reddish gleam they called orichalcum, more precious than gold. The description is a tapestry of sensory detail. You can almost feel the cool, moist air of the canals, hear the splash of oars and the creak of dockyards, smell the baking bread and the salt and the exotic resins. The architecture was said to be of stone in every color: white, black, red. They carved their dwellings, their baths, their public buildings with a skill that made them gleam in the sun. Everything was large, the Egyptians said. The harbor was vast, the canals wide, the wisdom of their leaders profound. But woven into this picture of perfection is a subtle, soft thread of change. The priest spoke of how, over many generations, the divine nature in the Atlanteans began to dilute, becoming too human. Their greatness began to feel like a right, not a gift. The brightness of their wisdom grew cloudy with pride. They started to desire more land, more wealth, more dominion over their neighbors. The perfect geometry of the rings began to feel, to them, like a cage. They looked beyond their own beautiful, watery moats and saw the rest of the world, and in their hearts, a quiet, swelling tide of ambition began to rise. Section 3. The Weight of Ages. And so we turn from the story itself to the land that may have cradled it. We turn to the island of Santorini, and to a time thousands of years before Plato ever dipped his pen in ink. The year is roughly 1600 BCE. The place is Thera, as it was known then. On this island, a society flourishes. They are the Minoans of the Aegean, a people of breathtaking art and stunning architecture. Their towns are built of stone, their streets paved, their frescoes vibrant with dancing dolphins and floating lilies. They have no need for massive walls. Their power is cultural, maritime, peaceful. Their ships are the swiftest on the sea. The air is dry and clear. The sea is a deep, impossible blue. The people are lean and sun-browned, their lives ordered around the seasons, the trade winds, and the sacred cycles of their gods. They live in a world of light and color. You can walk through a reconstructed room in Akrotiri and trace your finger over a plastered wall, feeling the smoothness where a fresco once showed a woman with a head of blue hair, collecting saffron. The scent of sea and dried herbs hangs in the air. This is a high civilization, elegant and serene. And then, the earth stirs. It begins not with a bang, but with a groan. A tremor, deep beneath the sea, somewhere to the north. The vessels in the harbor sway. A low thunder is heard from the direction of a volcanic island, a steep, cone-shaped peak that sailors had long called Strongyle. For days, the ground shudders. Small tremors, like a sleeping giant flexing its muscles. The birds flee the cliffs. The sea in the harbor grows strangely calm, then pulls back farther than any living person can remember, exposing the weed-covered rocks of the shore, a terrifying, silent retreat. The people are anxious, but they have seen earth movements before. They are a resilient people. Then, a sound like the world tearing apart. A colossal roar from the northern sky. A column of black cloud, shot through with lightning, climbs into the heavens. It is followed by a wave. Not a wave like any wave. A mountain of water, a slope of churning, gray-green fury, taller than the tallest palm tree, moving faster than a running man. It does not crash, it bulldozes. It swallows the northern coast of Thera whole. It drowns the town of Akrotiri under layers of volcanic ash and pumice and mud. It strikes the other islands of the Aegean with the force of a planetary sigh. The civilization that produced those serene frescoes is buried in time, frozen under meters of volcanic debris, preserved for millennia like a butterfly in ash. The eruption was one of the largest in human history. It reshaped the island, blowing its central part into a caldera, a great watery eye in the shape of a crescent moon. The tsunamis radiated across the entire eastern Mediterranean. They would have struck the coasts of Crete, of Egypt, of Anatolia. They would have shattered fleets, drowned coastal towns, and scarred the collective memory of every seafaring people for generations. The event was so immense, so cataclysmic, that it surely became the seed of 1,000 stories. A story of an entire island, a great power, swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. A story that would travel on the lips of sailors and priests for 3,000 years until it found its way into a philosopher's dialogue. Section 4. The Egyptian Archive. Let the mind drift now, across the wine-dark sea, to the banks of the Nile. To the city of Say, in the Delta, a place of ancient, dusty wisdom. The year is around 590 BCE. A Greek, old and revered, has come. His name is Solon. He is a lawgiver, a poet, a man whose questions have shaped Athens. And he is here to learn. He sits in the cool, columned hall of the Temple of Neith, the goddess of weaving and hidden things. Before him are priests, men with faces like worn river stones, their eyes holding the memory of dynasties. The air here is thick with incense, myrrh and frankincense, and the dry, dusty smell of papyrus scrolls stacked in silent archives that go back further than the pyramids. The light is dim, slanting through high clerestory windows, illuminating motes of dust that dance like souls of the forgotten. The priests speak in low, resonant tones. They tell Solon of the great deluge that destroyed the Athenians of old, a story he knows. Then, one elder leans forward. He says there is another tale, of a power that came before that deluge. A mighty confederation of kings, he says, whose seat was an island larger than Libya and Asia combined. It was a pathway to other islands, and from those islands, you could reach the continent that encircles the true ocean. The priest describes the island, the rings of land and water, the dazzling architecture, the canals. He says this power, Atlantis, was the greatest of its time. It ruled Egypt and the lands as far as Tyrrhenia, which we might call Italy. And then, in a single terrible night and day, the gods sent violent earthquakes and floods, and the island of Atlantis sank beneath the sea. The account is precise, seemingly historical. It mentions specific metals, specific measurements, a specific era, more than 9,000 years before Solon's time. So the story passes from Egyptian stone to Greek mind. It is not told as a thrilling secret, but as a sober piece of ancient history, a curiosity from the vast, pre-human archives of the temple. To the priests, it may have been just another entry in a long catalogue of fallen realms. To Solon, it was a staggering thought. A civilization more ancient and advanced than any Greek had dared to imagine, gone in a divine catastrophe. He carries this mental image, this grain of sand of history, back to Athens. And he tells it to Critias. And Critias, decades later, tells it to Socrates. And Plato, listening, sees its potential not as history, but as a powerful allegory. The perfect setting for a story about what happens to a perfect society when it loses its way. The factual kernel, if there was one, is wrapped gently in the gauze of philosophy. Section 5. Across the Silent Sea. And so the name Atlantis, and the bare bones of its story, enter the Western mind. But for 2,000 years after Plato, it mostly rests there, in the pages of his dialogues, admired as a literary device, a philosophical parable about ideal states and their decay. It is a beautiful idea, not a geographical fact. Scholars debate its symbolism. Was it a warning about imperial Athens? A critique of tyranny? A cosmic allegory? The actual search for its location is almost non-existent. The world is too busy with its own wars and schisms and renaissance to look for a lost city from the dawn of time. Then, the world changes. The age of exploration dawns. Ships with tall masts and cannons push past the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, and into the vast, unknown Atlantic. They find new continents. They realize the world is incomparably larger than Plato or any ancient could have known. And in the minds of some learned men, a spark ignites. If the world is so much bigger, could Plato's description, so precise, so detailed, be based on a real place? Could the island of Atlantis have been the Americas themselves? This theory gains traction. A 17th-century scholar, Abraham Ortelius, looks at the matching coastlines of South America and Africa and suggests the Americas were torn from Europe by earthquakes. A sudden, global cataclysm reminiscent of Atlantis's fate. Others point to Plato's Pillars of Hercules and say, well, if you go beyond them, you find the Atlantic Ocean. And in that ocean, might there be a sunken land? The idea begins to shift from allegory to geography. The search begins in earnest. The spirit of the age is one of discovery, of mapping the unknown. But the search for Atlantis is a search for a phantom. Every new island, every strange culture in the Americas, is scrutinized. Could these be descendants of the Atlanteans? Could their megalithic temples be the last stones of Poseidon's city? The Bay of Cadiz in Spain is scrutinized for its shoals and sunken ridges. The Canary Islands are considered. The Azores, the lush, mysterious land of Plato's description, larger than Libya and Asia, does not fit any known island. The search becomes fevered, then fanciful. Atlantis is placed in the North Sea, in the Pacific, even in the Antarctic. It becomes a Rorschach test for the hopes and prejudices of the seeker. Some see a vanished super-civilization of white masters. Others see a matriarchal utopia. The gentle, philosophical echo from Plato's garden has become a roaring, conflicted shout across the globe. A blank canvas onto which every dream and fear is projected. And the original story, quiet and meditative in its simple tragedy, is nearly lost beneath the noise. Section 6. The calm before the modern storm. Let us step back from the frenzy. Let us find a calmer shore. In the 19th century, a man named Ignatius Donnelly writes a book called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. He argues passionately, meticulously, that Atlantis was a real, advanced continent in the mid-Atlantic that sank in a cataclysm, and that all ancient civilizations, Egypt, Peru, India, were its scattered children. His work is a bestseller. It gives the Atlantis myth a veneer of scholarly respectability and a thrilling, global scope. It captures the public imagination utterly. And then, in 1882, a German scholar named Theodor Boschenstein publishes an article pointing not to the Atlantic, but to a place already famous for its Bronze Age collapse, the island of Thera. He notes the incredible power of the eruption, its timing, around 1500 BCE, which could fit if one adjusts Plato's exaggerated 9,000 years to a more plausible 900. The devastation it would have caused across the Aegean. He suggests the story passed from Minoan refugees to Egyptians, then to Greeks. The idea is electrifying in its simplicity. Here is a real, archaeologically documented catastrophe. A people of stunning sophistication. A sudden, violent end. And a location. In the Mediterranean, the very sea Plato describes as being within the Pillars of Hercules, which, in some ancient interpretations, could refer to the mountains on either side of the Nile or even to the Straits of the Bosporus, not just Gibraltar. The evidence is tantalizing but soft, suggestive. The Minoan civilization did collapse around this time, likely due to the Thera eruption and subsequent Mycenaean invasion. Their art shows a love of the sea, of nature, of peace. Their architecture on Crete and Thera shows a complex, multi-story, light-filled elegance. They had advanced plumbing and stunning frescoes. To a late 20th century mind, looking at the vibrant images of dolphins and lilies from Akrotiri, the idea that this could be the seed of the Atlantis myth feels almost right. It is a civilization that felt advanced, felt peaceful, that was destroyed by a cataclysm from the sea. It fits the emotional truth of the story better than any sunken Atlantic continent ever could. But the evidence is not a smoking gun. The timeline is a flexible thing. The descriptions don't match perfectly. Was it Thera? Was it Crete? Was it a composite memory of both, blurred by centuries of retelling? The mystery remains, softly, beautifully, intact. Section 7. The Pulse of the Earth. To consider Atlantis is to consider the Earth's own rhythms. We live on a restless planet. Its crust is not a solid shell but a jigsaw of plates that slowly, inexorably, grind past one another. Where they grind, they create earthquakes. Where they pull apart or push together, they create volcanoes. And where one plate sinks beneath another, it creates a trench, a gash in the ocean floor that can, in the cataclysmic event of a mega-thrust earthquake, cause the seafloor to suddenly lurch upward, displacing trillions of tons of water and sending a tsunami racing across the ocean. This is the engine behind every plausible Atlantis theory. The Thera eruption was driven by the African plate diving beneath the Aegean plate. The Pacific, Ring of Fire, is a testament to this constant, slow violence. The idea of a great island sinking in a single day is not fantastical geology. It is a dramatic but possible expression of tectonic truth. A coastal plain can be uplifted into mountains. A volcanic island can blow itself apart and collapse into its own caldera. A section of continental shelf, destabilized by an earthquake, can slump into the deep, taking its soils and towns with it in a rapid, grim subsidence. The Earth does not need to vanish an entire continent in a single motion. It needs only to make a large, populated coastal region suddenly uninhabitable, to plunge it beneath the waves, and the human memory, over millennia, will magnify the scale. What was a regional disaster becomes a global one in the telling. What was a century of decline and war after a volcanic winter becomes a sudden, divine punishment. So in the quiet of your mind, imagine not magic, but pressure. Imagine magma, silent and immense, cooling in chambers under a beautiful, sun-drenched island. Imagine the ground swelling almost imperceptibly over years. Imagine springs turning bitter, animals fleeing the high ground. This is the prologue, unnoticed. Then, the climax, a soundless, subterranean rupture. The sky turning to midnight at noon. The ground dancing like a leaf. The sea, first pulling back in a terrifying, curious calm, then returning not as water but as a moving mountain. And then, the long aftermath. The year without summer, the crops failing, the survivors huddled on foreign shores, telling and retelling the story of the beautiful land that was no more. The geological truth is slow, grinding, impersonal. The human experience of it is sudden, terrifying, and absolute. Atlantis, at its heart, may be the story of that collision between deep time and human time. Section 8. Breathing room. The deep sea holds its breath. And now, let the factual threads fall away. Just for a little while. Let us simply imagine being in the place where Atlantis, if it existed, now rests. Not a tomb, but a transformation. The city is not broken and scattered. It is not ruins in the way we think of ruins. It is quiet. It is whole. The perfect rings of canals are still there, filled now with the cold, clear water of the deep ocean. The streets are not cracked. They are carpeted in fine white sediment, in places so smooth they look paved with moonlight. The great temples, carved of red and black stone, are not collapsed. They stand intact, their columns and pediments stark and perfect in the perpetual midnight of the abyss. The light that filters down from the world above is a faint, ethereal blue, dimming with every meter. It is a world of silence, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a stalactite in a submerged cave, or the distant, low hum of a faraway current. The air is gone, replaced by water that is cold and heavy and still. Sea fans, delicate as lace, wave in a current too weak for us to feel. Sponges, the color of rust and cream, cling to the sunken walls. A school of tiny, silver fish moves through what was once a grand boulevard, their bodies flashing like scattered coins. An octopus, its skin shifting texture and color to match the ancient stone, rests in the shadow of a fallen capital, one eye looking out into the endless blue gloom. Nothing breathes here but the sea itself. The grand civilization, the shouts of the market, the chants of the priests, the clang of the smithy, all gone, dissolved into the mute, patient pressure of the water. Time moves differently down here. A century is a breath. 1,000 years, a gentle settling. The stone does not know it was once a home. It is simply stone, in the dark, wearing its coat of silt and slow-growing life. The city is not lost. It is preserved. It is sleeping in a way no human ever can. A sleep without dreams, without memory, a sleep that is simply a state of being. It is the most peaceful ruin imaginable. It asks for nothing. It gives nothing. It simply is, in the vast, cold calm of the deep. And if you float there in your mind's eye, you would feel no fear, only a profound, awe-filled stillness. The greatest mystery is not how it sank, but that it now rests in such perfect, unperturbed quiet. Section 9. The many faces of the myth. The myth of Atlantis is a mirror. It reflects the age that looks into it. In the 19th century, it was a lost world of antediluvian science, a progenitor of all culture. In the early 20th, occultists like Madame Blavatsky wove it into complex theosophical cosmologies, a realm of spiritual masters. After World War II, with the dawn of the nuclear age, some saw Atlantis as a victim of its own advanced technology, a civilization that destroyed itself with powers it could not control, a clear parallel to modern anxieties. In the 1960s and 70s, with the rise of New Age thought, Atlantis became a utopia of psychic powers, harmonious living, and crystal technology, a golden age lost to a spiritually corrupt humanity. Each retelling smooths the rough edges of the original philosophical tale. The moral about hubris is often replaced by a nostalgic longing for a lost harmony. The stern warning from Plato becomes a lament for a golden past. The violent earthquakes and floods become either a specific, knowable geological event or a metaphor for a spiritual cataclysm. The vague, almost generic description from Plato, concentric rings, a central temple, orichalcum, is filled in by every theorist with their own vision. Flying machines, laser-like energy beams, a global matriarchy, a race of giants. This is the life of myth. It is not inert. It is a seed that grows different plants in different soils. The ancient Egyptian seed, if there ever was one, has germinated in the fertile ground of human longing. We want Atlantis to be real because we want history to be cyclical, to believe that greatness is possible, that it has been achieved before, and perhaps can be again. We want a lost paradise to yearn for, a perfect society that failed and thus absolves our own imperfect one of ultimate responsibility. Or, conversely, we want a cautionary tale so powerful it can steer us away from our own path of pride. The myth serves our needs. It is a gentle, endless conversation between the past we imagine and the present we inhabit. Section 10. The sediment of time. Let us return to the original text. To the quiet, measured words of Plato's Timaeus and Critias. Read them slowly. They are not an adventure story. They are a framework. Critias tells Socrates he will recount a strange story, but a true one, about a contest between the ancient Athenians and the imperial might of Atlantis. The Athenians are the good society, the one founded on the principles of the ideal state described in Plato's Republic. Atlantis is the vast, wealthy, technically brilliant, but ultimately corrupt empire that seeks to enslave the world. The Athenians, though vastly outnumbered, are victorious, not by force, but by their superior virtue and discipline. Then, after this victory, the earth shakes. A day and night of rain and flood comes. The island of Atlantis sinks into the sea. The Athenian army is also swallowed by the earth in the same catastrophe. The world is reset. The story is meant to illustrate that perfect societies, even when victorious, are always subject to the whims of cosmic order. That greatness is fragile. That divine anger is the equalizer. This is the core. It is a political and theological parable. The details, the rings, the metals, the canals, are decorative scaffolds. They make the allegory feel concrete, tangible. They are the stage dressing for a drama about virtue versus vice. The mystery of Atlantis is less about where it sank and more about why Plato wrote it. Was it a veiled critique of the aggressive Athenian empire of his own day? A thought experiment about what happens when a state loses its spiritual mooring. The historical kernel, if any, is secondary to the philosophical point. The story's power lies in its structure. A perfect world, a fatal flaw, a divine reset. That pattern echoes in every human civilization, in every personal life. We are all Atlantis, in our moments of greatest confidence, ignoring the tremors beneath our feet. Perhaps the greatest piece to be found in the Atlantis myth is in its lesson of impermanence. All cities, all empires, all ways of life, are temporary. They rise, they glitter, they fall. The sand reclaims the harbor. The ivy claims the palace. The sea takes back what it once gave. To know this is not to be sad, but to be gentle. To build with a soft hand. To appreciate the light on the marble while it lasts. Atlantis is the ultimate memento mori for a civilization. It sleeps peacefully now because its story has taught us, gently, that nothing built by human hands can last forever. And that this is not a tragedy, but simply the nature of things. Section 11. The still point. And so we come to rest. The search for Atlantis has been many things. A scholarly pursuit, a pseudoscientific crusade, a spiritual quest, a pop culture phenomenon. It has mapped the ocean floor with sonar, sent submarines to peer at strange rock formations, analyzed core samples from the Atlantic's deepest plains. It has found nothing but geology, abyssal plains, tectonic scars, hot springs. No lost city. No paved ring roads. No bronze tridents. The ocean, for all its depth, is not a repository of ancient streets. It is a graveyard of sediments, a churn of currents, a world of its own. The evidence for a sudden, continent-scale submersion in the geologically recent past is non-existent. The Earth does not work that way. Islands erode, volcanoes erupt and collapse, sea levels rise slowly, but an entire mid-ocean landmass, the size of a small continent, vanishing in a single cataclysm? The planet keeps no such secret. The more plausible candidates, Thera, perhaps a remembered coastal site in the Black Sea or the North Sea, are not Atlantis in the grand sense. They are fragments, echoes, inspiration. They are the asterisk possibility that a real place, a real trauma, could have seeded a myth so powerful it outlived the civilization that forgot its origin. The beauty of Atlantis is that it exists now more powerfully in the world of story than it ever did, or ever could, in stone. It is a thought form, a shared human daydream about a past more perfect, more advanced, more tragic than our own. It is a gentle ghost, haunting the boundary between history and myth. Section 12. The quiet after. The waves have turned to silver now. The moon has moved, higher and a little paler. The air has cooled, and you can feel a faint, damp mist rising from the sea. The story of Atlantis, like the tide, has come in. It whispered from an Egyptian priest, was sculpted by a Greek philosopher, was blown upon by the winds of every age, was sought in the dark depths by curious minds. And now, like the water sliding back from the sand, it is receding. The facts, the theories, the arguments, they all fade into the background hum of the sleeping world. What remains is the feeling of a perfect place that was, and then was not. The feeling of a great silence where a great sound once was. The feeling of water over stone, so slow and deep and timeless it erases all memory of footsteps. You are lying in the dark, safe in your own bed, in your own time. The world outside your window is ordinary, familiar, gentle. And somewhere, in the infinite dark of the ocean's heart, there is still a city. Not of stone, but of wonder. Not of history, but of story. It rests there, complete and whole, in the only peace it will ever need. A city not lost, but transformed. A dream of the world, dreaming itself back into the deep, slow, breathing dark. The tide has fully turned. The night is at its deepest point, the blackest velvet just before the first hint of dawn. The last sound you hear is the soft, endless sigh of the sea against the shore, a sound as old as the earth itself. It is the sound of everything settling, of sand grains finding their place, of water remembering its calm. Your breath is slow and deep, matching the rhythm of the sleeping world. The story of the city in the deep is now part of that calm. It has dissolved, like salt in water, into the great, quiet emptiness. There is nothing more to hold, nothing more to know, just the soft, warm dark, and the gentle, endless pull of the waves, pulling everything, slowly, gently, toward peace.